Could Maloney become the special intermediary between the EU and the White House if Trump is reelected? A private meeting in Washington hints at significant signals. On July 13, 2023, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni met privately with former U.S. President Donald Trump at his Washington residence, just hours after her official meeting with President Joe Biden. Trump stated, "We have a 100% chance of reaching a trade deal with the EU if I return to office," signaling an interest in reviving negotiation channels that had previously stalled. Meloni, for her part, emphasized the shared objective of making the West great again, underscoring a common alignment in conservative political values. Trump described Meloni as a strong and respected woman, adding that Europe respects her, suggesting she may serve as a potential bridge between Washington and Brussels in the event of his return to the White House. Should trade talks resume under an America First approach, European consumers could face higher prices on imported goods. Conversely, American industries might be affected by potential EU retaliatory measures if relations turn tense. Meloni, with a long-standing personal rapport with Trump, could help ensure a more stable dialogue, mitigating the risk of sudden policy shifts between two of the world's largest economies. During the Biden administration, a temporary agreement was reached, but by March 2025, Trump reinstated a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum, prompting the EU to prepare retaliatory measures worth 26 billion euros. In 2023, trade in goods and services between the EU and the US reached 1.6 trillion euros, accounting for roughly 20% of the EU's total global trade volume. Trump has previously referred to the EU as a trade adversary and opposed multilateral agreements like the TTIP, preferring bilateral negotiations. He has also criticized the EU's regulatory stance on US tech companies. The EU remains concerned that renewed tariffs could disrupt exports and supply chains. In response, Brussels is pushing forward its strategic autonomy agenda, aiming to reduce dependency on the US in sectors like defense and technology. Instruments like the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, and data protection regulations, GDPR, are being enforced to safeguard the EU's long-term interests. While Germany and France back the idea of an independent European defense strategy, Italy, under Meloni, has signaled a more pragmatic approach toward cooperation with Trump and the Republican Party. This divergence could complicate the EU's ability to present a unified stance in response to evolving U.S. policies. As the 2024 G7 President and Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni chaired the G7 summit held in Fasano, Italy, from June 13th to 15. The summit marked a historic first, with the participation of Pope Francis, alongside leaders from member nations and international guests. Meloni has maintained a personal connection with former President Trump since before her premiership. She was the only EU leader to attend his inauguration in January 2025. However, other EU leaders, such as French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, have kept a degree of distance from Trump. They maintain that any bilateral arrangements must stay within the EU's collective framework to preserve unity and prevent internal divisions. If Meloni succeeds in her role as a mediator, EU citizens could avoid additional tariffs from the US, stabilizing import prices and protecting jobs in export-oriented industries. American consumers, in turn, could benefit from continued access to European goods, particularly automobiles, wines, and high-end products. From immigration and trade deficits to redefining the idea of the Western alliance, Europe is once again at the heart of Donald Trump's global agenda. What lies ahead for citizens on both sides of the Atlantic? In a July 2018 interview with CBS News, former President Donald Trump referred to the European Union as a FOE in trade matters, stating, "I think we have a lot of foes, I think the European Union is a FOE, what they do to us in trade. Now, according to Anthony Gardner, former U.S. ambassador to the EU, Trump believes internal division is the most effective way to weaken the bloc. Gardner noted that the EU has been undermined by years of criticism, as is happening now under Trump. During a meeting with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in Washington on April 17, 2025, Trump expressed optimism about a potential trade deal with the EU, asserting that there will be a trade agreement, 100%. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen reiterated the EU's preference for dialogue, but affirmed the bloc is prepared to take countermeasures if necessary, including the imposition of digital service taxes on U.S. companies. Should U.S. EU relations deteriorate further due to divisive strategies or controversial remarks, consumers on both sides of the Atlantic may feel the impact of higher import tariffs, leading to rising prices, especially for European imports like automobiles, wine, and pharmaceuticals. In 2024, the European Union recorded approximately 912,000 first-time asylum applications from non-EU nationals, a 13% decrease from 2023's total of 1.05 million. The largest share of applications was received by Germany, 25%, followed by Spain, 18%, Italy, 17%, and France, 14%. The majority of asylum seekers came from Syria, Venezuela, and Afghanistan. President Trump has argued that current immigration policies pose significant challenges to European nations. In a recent statement, he claimed that the people of Germany are tired of a program that lacks common sense, especially regarding energy and immigration. Immigration continues to shape labor markets, social welfare systems, and community life across Europe. Many EU citizens have felt increasing pressure on housing, healthcare, and education infrastructure, particularly in major cities. However, immigration has also helped address labor shortages in key sectors such as agriculture, healthcare, and construction. Debates sparked by leaders like Trump and Prime Minister Meloni have brought to the forefront the broader question: should migration be managed primarily as a risk to control or as a resource to harness? In 2024, the U.S. trade deficit in goods and services with the European Union reached $235.6 billion, an increase of $26.9 billion compared to 2023. With Italy specifically, the U.S. recorded a $44 billion trade deficit, exporting approximately $32 billion in goods and services, while importing about $76 billion. Trump has emphasized the need for fair trade relationships, calling on partners such as the EU and Italy to help reduce the imbalance. He has argued that bilateral trade must be adjusted to ensure reciprocity. In an attempt to ease tensions, the EU has proposed eliminating industrial tariffs on both sides, excluding agricultural products. However, the Trump administration has insisted on including agriculture in the negotiations, causing talks to stall. If either side imposes tariffs, consumers may face higher prices for European products like wine, cheese, and cars, as well as for American electronics. Small businesses, particularly exporters, could also be adversely affected. Anthony Gardner has underscored Italy's unique position in the EU, noting that it received the largest allocation from the bloc's post-pandemic recovery fund, approximately $191.5 billion under the Next Generation EU program. Gardner advised that Prime Minister Meloni should remain mindful that she represents not only Italy, but also the broader interests of the EU. According to Eurostat data, as of December 2024, around 51% of Italy's total exports were directed toward EU member states, highlighting the country's significant reliance on the single European market. Former President Trump has previously asserted that the EU was formed as an economic competitor to the United States. He has argued that the bloc has taken advantage of the U.S. through what he perceives as unfair trade practices. The United States has recently imposed a 10% tariff on goods imported from the United Kingdom. presenting significant challenges to the British economy. However, could this development also present a potential opportunity for the UK to thrive in the face of global uncertainties? The 10% tariff on UK goods entering the United States officially came into effect on Wednesday. While this rate is considerably lower than tariffs imposed on other countries, it is still expected to have a noticeable impact on the UK economy in the short term. Industries such as automotive and pharmaceuticals are likely to face the most significant effects. The UK's automotive industry, home to prominent brands like Jaguar Land Rover and Mini, is forecast to be particularly affected. Manufacturers may encounter increased costs due to the tariffs, forcing them to adjust production or seek alternative markets to mitigate the damage. Specifically, factories in Oxford, where Jaguar Land Rover and Mini vehicles are produced, could face production scale downs, threatening approximately 25,000 jobs. Moreover, pharmaceutical companies like AstraZeneca and GlaxoSmithKline, major exporters to the U.S., will also face challenges in maintaining profitability. Around 40% and 50% of their products, respectively, are exported to the U.S., and higher tariffs could reduce the competitiveness of these products in the American market. According to a recent financial report from the Bank of England, the UK's financial markets remain stable. British banks have also demonstrated a strong capacity to support households and businesses, should the economy face further difficulties in the future. However, financial experts advise against withdrawing investments in the face of short-term volatility, as stock markets tend to recover after brief recessions. While the trade war initiated by Trump has created difficulties for many countries, it could present an opportunity for the United Kingdom to attract foreign investment. The UK has seen a decline in foreign investment in recent years, primarily due to uncertainties surrounding the political and economic situation post-Brexit. However, the 10% tariff imposed by the U.S. on UK goods may make Britain a more appealing option, especially compared to other nations within the European Union, where U.S. tariffs are over 20%. Investors are likely to seek countries with stable and low tariff environments to maintain their competitiveness. With relatively low tariffs from the U.S. and the UK achieving a certain level of political stability following the recent governmental power transition, the UK could attract more foreign investment. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and other UK political leaders have emphasized the importance of re-establishing trade and political relations with the European Union to alleviate the challenges brought about by Brexit. The UK is seeking to strengthen ties with the EU, especially in the areas of economic and defense cooperation. This is evident through plans for a UK-EU trade conference, scheduled for May 19th, aimed at improving trade conditions and removing barriers to the exchange of goods and services. If the UK can reach agreements with the EU on trade facilitation measures, such as mutual recognition of qualifications and defense collaboration, this will be a crucial step in strengthening the UK's economic position in the future. Trade tensions between the United States and China are escalating significantly, with a series of countermeasures emerging from Beijing. The question now arises, what will China do next to navigate and potentially reshape the global trade landscape? During the early phase of the U.S.-China trade war, 2018 to 2019, when the Trump administration imposed a 10% tariff on Chinese goods, Beijing expressed strong dissatisfaction. However, as the tariff rate rose to 34%, the language shifted to firm opposition. At the height of tensions, when the United States threatened an additional 50% tariff in response to China's retaliatory measures, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce escalated its tone, no longer limited to stating firm opposition. The ministry described the move as a mistake on top of a mistake, and even used terminology equivalent to extortion a term rarely employed in official discourse. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, 2024, China has implemented a wide range of large-scale retaliatory measures. At the peak of the tensions, China imposed tariffs as high as 84% on a variety of U.S. imports, including energy products, agricultural goods, and consumer items. In addition, China introduced export restrictions on strategic minerals, among them rare earth elements, which are essential for both technological applications and national defense. A notable example is the TikTok negotiations. After the U.S. government requested that control of TikTok's American operations be transferred to domestic investors, China initially appeared to be in agreement. However, according to the New York Times, April 2025, as trade tensions escalated, Beijing unexpectedly withdrew from the arrangement, leading to a deadlock. According to the Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute, 2024, China continues to maintain a significant trade surplus and holds one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds, valued at over 1.2 trillion US dollars. In response to the United States raising cumulative tariffs on Chinese goods to 100% within a few months, 2024 to 2025, the Chinese government introduced a direct support package aimed at stabilizing financial markets, as reported by Reuters. Specifically, the People's Bank of China, PBOC, injected credit into enterprises operating in sectors affected by the tariffs. State-owned funds purchased listed shares to curb the sharp decline in the stock market. As a result, China's financial market, which had experienced a steep drop in early April 2025, stabilized and showed modest recovery in the following sessions. China is actively engaging in international forums to promote its image as a stable economic partner that refrains from interfering in the internal affairs of other countries, while upholding the principles of equality, multipolarity, and mutually beneficial cooperation. According to the South China Morning Post, at the Munich Security Conference in February 2025, China's representatives delivered a 4-point message: ensure equal treatment among nations, adhere to international law, promote multilateralism, encourage openness, and the sharing of economic benefits. In addition, China is leveraging its stance of non-conditionality, not linking cooperation to human rights, environmental commitments, or institutional reforms, to appeal to developing countries. These nations often face large capital needs, but may be reluctant to accept pressure from Western powers. China is using soft power and its economic strengths to develop a global network of partners, with a strong emphasis on pragmatism and long-term commitment. However, developments in the South China Sea and the Taiwan issue may influence the level of trust China aims to foster on the world stage. In a strategic shift, the United States has temporarily suspended additional tariffs on over 75 countries, while intensifying its trade stance toward China. What lies behind President Trump's recalibrated trade approach? On April 9, 2025, President Donald Trump announced a 90-day suspension of new tariffs for most trading partners, excluding China. The move aims to create a window for constructive trade discussions. At the same time, import tariffs on Chinese goods have been raised to 125%. According to President Trump, the measure targets countries that have responded with retaliatory actions. In contrast, nations that OPT for dialogue will benefit from the temporary freeze. Markets responded positively to the announcement, with the S&P 500 climbing 9.5%, its strongest performance in years. Financial analysts view this as a sign that the U.S. is seeking a balance between applying pressure and encouraging diplomatic engagement in international trade relations. In his April 9th address, President Trump emphasized China's role as the U.S.'s largest trading partner, noting the significant trade imbalance. According to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, the U.S. imported approximately $438.9 billion in goods from China in 2024, while exporting around $143.5 billion, resulting in a goods trade deficit of $295.4 billion, an increase of 5.8% compared to 2023. Rising deficit. The continued growth in the trade deficit highlights a deepening imbalance in bilateral trade relations. Data discrepancies. There remains a gap between official figures from the U.S. and China. While the U.S. reports a $295 billion deficit, Chinese authorities have cited a $360 billion surplus. Sector impacts. Prolonged trade deficits may affect key U.S. industries, particularly those directly competing with Chinese imports, such as consumer electronics, textiles, and toys. President Trump noted that China has expressed interest in reaching a trade agreement, but appears uncertain about the path forward. They don't know how to get there, he remarked. According to Al Jazeera, U.S. trade officials indicated that Beijing has yet to formally pursue new negotiation rounds. That same day, the U.S. raised tariffs on Chinese goods to 125%, while extending a tariff freeze to other nations. In response, China convened emergency meetings and vowed to fight to the end, announcing plans to impose retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products. President Trump also stated that more than 75 countries have approached the U.S. to initiate discussions on trade, tariffs, and market access. These countries have refrained from retaliatory measures and expressed a willingness to pursue mutually beneficial solutions. Global reaction. The wide interest in engaging with the U.S. reflects international concern about the evolving American tariff policy and a shared desire to preserve stable trade relations. U.S. negotiation strategy. The Trump administration is expected to pursue individualized negotiations with each country, aiming for tailored bilateral agreements. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent noted that each solution would be custom designed, and the president intends to play a direct role in the process. Concluding his remarks, President Trump expressed strong confidence in the nation's economic trajectory, predicting unprecedented breakthroughs within the next year. He asserted that the new trade policies would stimulate economic growth and generate jobs. Indeed, U.S. stock markets have shown notable recovery. However, some economists have raised concerns about the potential for an economic slowdown if tariffs remain in place. J.P. Morgan Chase & Co. has projected a risk of recession later this year, should current tariff strategies persist